Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri, and today we're going to talk about educational requirements and degrees specifically. So this is not necessarily like a planned video. This is more or less my reaction to some comments on a video. Good comments, good questions, like by no means like going off on this. But I want to talk about some things that I just haven't really talked about a lot on the channel. And then I feel like when I start moving towards these topics, it ends up offending a lot of people. A lot of people get upset. But we're just going to dive into this. So if you don't want to be offended, most students, for example, will probably be offended by this. Just click something up here. I'll put a link and you can watch something fun and exciting. But let's just dive in and talk about this. So Bronze asked the question on this video, Dimitri, I need another video. CS majors are finding out that programming and CS are not the same. CS, so computer science, is more like math with computers. What about your master's? Was it overkill for you? I mean, I feel like they're overcomplicated. The degree, when the job only requires 2 parts out of 10 parts that I learned. I may use the other 8 once every year, my actual major being physics and my minor being CS. You can imagine how boring it would be. Is your degree overkill, right? That's really the question for this. So first off, 100% agree, right? Programming is very, very, very small in a computer science. Computer science is a massive topic, and it's why it's frustrating when I try to explain to people that, for example, quantitative finance is math, statistics, computer science, because a lot of times people say, oh yeah, programming, and I keep explaining realistically, the gist of this is math and stats is the heaviest piece, but computer science is needed for optimization techniques and running computers and a lot of that. And a lot of times programming is the necessary skill to have with stats and math, but a lot of quants don't have computer science background. So optimizing and setting up infrastructures and frameworks and there's a lot more to it in computer science than programming. So I completely agree on that. But I want to talk a little bit about, is your degree overkill? And I want to tack on another comment here. There's another guy that put a comment on the bottom and put, to be a real quant, you need a PhD in mathematics or statistics or physics. Preferably also a postdoc could be an advantage. Okay. So how not to offend too many people with this? So let's just take a step back here and talk a little bit about finance and models before we dive into the minimum requirements, which I think a lot of people are looking at. The actual averages and standards, and then my ridiculously high unmeetable standard in general. So we'll talk about the 3 levels here. So in finance, when you have models, and I think this is probably the most atrocious sin that universities are teaching, it's very angering, and I see this in the United States, students and graduates. I've seen it with some of the top universities in Europe, for example. Everybody thinks that you have some sort of problem, and that you build a model, and then you just pick whichever model is the best model that you find. So you have, let's say a problem, you need to model, pricing for something. And they think somehow okay, I build a really crappy model in Excel because I'm, not qualified. And then somebody else says, oh, I built a statistical model using OLS. And then somebody else says, oh, I finally built an ARIMA model, using time series data and structuring. And then I came back and I pick which one has the best fit, and then you just go with that, right? That's fine. You just pick the best model and you just kind of look at different methods. You can try data science and you can find things. So this is how it works in many fields and many industries. And I'm not going to point out which ones because I have friends that work in these industries and fields and they have these opinions. I also follow the head of one of the largest companies globally. I'm not going to say which one, on LinkedIn. And they also post consistent nonsensical garbage. There's no other way for me to really say that nicely. And why I say this is because in finance and banking, this is not how it works. Finance and banking, it used to be, and it's deviating from this a bit, and it's causing some issues. It used to be very, very focused on high quality rigor and academics. And the reason being for this is a little bit different than most industries. So I worked for a manufacturing firm for a long time. We would predict, for example, revenues for the firm. Okay, I would predict how much revenue we would do next year. I could break it down into very detailed components on how many different types of products we sold, set up profit margins, We sold nationally, so shipping, freight, and all that play into it. How many we do in different states and regions and everything really impact the final profit. But at the end of the day, if I miss this calculation, it's not really that important. Okay, we did, I don't know, 1.2 million last year. Anybody with common sense will say, okay, you're going to be somewhere around 1.2 next year. If you think it's a good year, it's going to be like 1.4, 1.6, right? If it's going to be a terrible year, you might do, I don't know, 800,000, maybe 750, something like that. So, but at the end of the day, if we miss it or we hit it, there's really not a lot of impact behind it, right? There's definitely decisions that do it, but if we miss the target and I predict, I don't know, 1.3 million and we end up doing, 1.1 million, it doesn't really make an impact, okay? A lot of technology and other firms and other industries have similar situations where they throw a model at something, they do competitions, for example, they get some sort of modeling structure, calculation, and then they pick the best one and they do out-of-time testing, so we'll pretend they do things correctly, though I see this not done correctly in a lot of companies and industries. They go out, they build these terrible models, and then they just pick the best one, and then if it doesn't do well, it doesn't really matter, right? Kind of like the manufacturing example I gave. Yes, it's helpful to tell the investors what we're going to do for the year, right? It helps get funding from the bank. So if I can show that I did 1.2 last year, I'm going to do 1.6 this year, like it helps. So going back to banking and why it's important. So in banking, the industry is shifting dramatically. And I don't think a lot of people quite understand this. So credit risk, in my opinion, and from what I understand, a lot of the historical aspects of it, was probably the first area to really go into more purely statistical methods. And one of the reasons is that you can narrow down models more simply. So they're simpler. We have general guidelines. We can train almost anyone to do it. But there's parts you can't really train, and I'll explain that in a second. But credit risk is one of them. And then you have market risk and trading, right? Anyone that trades, there's a lot of hoo-ha and like waving of hands and things made up and people come up with ridiculous theories. And again, most of it's based on financial theory. And then you had technical analysis, which was a massive joke and never worked. But with banks, the issue is that when you make a model and you execute on that model, so let's say you have a pricing model for loans, for example, so credit risk here, and you misprice those loans, that could result in millions of dollars of losses. And I'll try to put some perspective on this here. This isn't like, oh, you're doing a few little models here and there and like it's off and you miss some calculations, okay? We had a model that I worked on at one of the banks I worked at a while ago. And we went in and we looked at the model and we wrote some findings and said, hey, this stuff is all broken. You need to fix all this. And so we wrote it all out. We submitted it. I don't think anything of it. We're sitting in a meeting and somebody asked the question, what is the impact on these corrections? So they built a model. You're coming to me from an academic perspective saying it does not meet these following standards. It must be fixed. They don't think it's an issue. What is the financial impact? We went through and recalculated it. It was over $200 million. So $200 million is going to be a massive loss on our books. $200 million is going to make or break a lot of portfolios, right? It's a big chunk. You start thinking about banking industry in the United States, you botch the market for, mortgages. You have a housing crisis, you misprice this, you're in these upside down, boom, market explodes, tons of people go jobless, banks go under, government's bailing people out. So when you screw a model up, it's not necessarily like a dinky, like we have dinky models, don't get me wrong. There are little tiny models and we look at them and it's like, I don't know, it has like a $500,000 impact, a $5 million impact. It doesn't really matter if you screw it up or not, right? It's $5 million for banking, it's not that much money. When you start getting into the hundreds of millions of dollars though, this is serious business. You can't just throw anyone in there and just pick the best model, right? You're just dumb. That's a really stupid idea and a stupid investment. And to take this from a different perspective to understand the severity of this, when you look at consulting firms, okay? So I've worked in consulting. I've seen quotes and bids though on the banking side as well. Most models that you would pay a big consulting firm to build for your bank will come in at over $1 million for a model, okay? I've seen contracts for a few months worth of work on a few different modeling areas, and quotes are coming in between like $3 and $6 million. So again, it depends on how big the model is. It depends on how much work it's going to be. It depends on how many resources it has, right? I've seen dinky little work done from consultants from $100,000. I've seen massive projects in the millions and millions and millions of dollars. They're annual contracts. They're massive, massive contracts. Now, you imagine a model. Let's just say it's a $1 million model. You pay $1 million for that model. It's worth it for these banks because it makes far more than $1 million in difference in profitability. Okay, so think about that here. You're building a model, let's say, and I make a change to your model and it impacts it by $100 million or $200 million, right? That's just a little bit of fudge space. Now, if you put someone in there that didn't know what they were doing versus someone that did know, and you save you $100 million or $200 million, even if it's $5 million, right? I save you $5 million. What is that worth? Paying $1 million to have someone build it that you think is more qualified is definitely a good investment. Okay. So from the banking side, modeling is very, very serious. I take my job very seriously. Every single day I go to work, I realize I could lose millions of dollars for these banks. A lot of people don't know. They don't really understand the grasp. They don't really understand the financial impacts. And it's somewhat chilling to realize there's so many people that are vastly underqualified working in these areas that don't really understand what's going on. Okay. So we're going to dive into the questions now here on, first off, let's go down to this. To be a real quant, you need to have a PhD in math or physics. And somebody put, not really, that just shows you're smart, which is true. And then they put, I disagree. I've worked in many large hedge funds, investment banks, insurers, regulators. The key people are quants with PhDs. Just telling the actual truth on this. Okay. So this is challenging. The minimum requirement to work as a quant in the United States is a master's. That's pretty factual, okay? That's the minimum. It has to be a quantitative master's too. You can't just have like an English master's. A PhD is always preferred. But going back to that, not really, that just shows you're smart. That's really why we're wanting the PhD. And this ties into the other question, which is why I'm starting with this here. The amount of education you get in a master's degree. So if you think about this, right, let's say you're doing 40 hours a week for 2 years. A lot of these are only 1 year, but 2 years is really what you should be going for a master's. So again, you're only going to school 2/3 of the time anyways. So let's just say you go to school for, 25 weeks, so half the year. So 2 years is about 50 weeks. If you had 50 weeks at 40 hours per week of studying, how much material do you know, right? This is one reason I don't encourage people to go for designations that are really short and simple. It's one reason I don't think that going to cheap master's programs is beneficial and super short master's programs are beneficial. It's also why industries prefer PhDs. Now, even myself, when I do interviewing, again, I lean towards PhDs because you have even more experience. The biggest difference, though, at least in my eyes, in my opinion, between a master's and a PhD just has to do with the research aspect. So again, you can do a thesis and a master's, but PhDs will spend more time digging deep on one topic rigorously, okay? That's what you really need to be a quant. So going into the question of, is your degree overkill? If you have a financial engineering degree from, let's say, the best university, the best program in the world, is it enough just to do the job? No, I don't think so. Is it enough to do the bare minimum job? Yeah, it's enough, right? Because you can come in and you can build a model, right? So let's say you go on a team and you build a model and you get it, it has to go through validation, and your validation team has no clue what they're doing either. And your internal audit doesn't know what they're doing. And let's say your regulators don't review that model or they don't know what they're doing either. At the end of the day, you could build the world's worst model, the world's most ridiculous assumptions, and you can use them. No one's going to stop you, okay? Now, there are assumptions in there, right? If your validation team's good enough, they should catch it and say, no, this sucks. This is terrible. This is garbage. You can't use it. Your internal audit team should do the same, and regulators should be asking very detailed questions on why is this botched? Why can't you do this? Makes no sense, okay? So to do the bare minimum, again, you could get that master's degree. It could be in stats, econometrics, right? Financial engineering, quantitative finance, mathematical finance, all these different topics. You could get a master's degree and you could do the job, you could do the bare minimum, and you can just squeak by not doing much. Okay? That's the truth. Now, the average person in a lot of these jobs is better than the bare minimum. So they're not going to just have a master's degree and just not care at all and kind of just float through. The average person that works in banking and quantitative finance in general right? They're middle of the road. They have some personal interest in the topic typically. They do a fairly good job, but they don't really eat, breathe, and sleep quant finance like some of us do. So is it required? Are you going to use everything? Again, if you get a financial engineering degree, there are different areas and different topics. So for example, I don't work with a lot of heavy mathematics and stochastic calculus because I don't work on that side of the business. I don't work in the derivative side. And I've mentioned other people, right? The derivatives markets was huge back in 2007. 2008 financial crisis comes around. All those financial engineering jobs compacted down to hardly anything. So there's not a lot of those jobs left. So if you went into financial engineering and you learn the Black-Scholes and you go through stochastic calculus and Ito's lemma and you use the Feynman-Kac method, whatever method you want to get to the final solution, and even if, so one of the advantages I don't think a lot of people realize here, a lot of really top-end financial engineering programs, the thing that makes them valuable is not necessarily the class or the textbook, it's the professor. So I had a few professors that were industry practitioners, and they would tell you things and they would teach the class sometimes with no book. There's no textbook for the class. They just teach you the class because what they're telling you isn't necessarily in a textbook. Okay. And what you learn in your financial engineering master's is a very, very short, condensed information piece. And the thing is, you don't really understand enough of it to actually do it. So you're going to have to go to a job and get training, and most people don't want to train you. You'll struggle, you'll fail. And I think this is one of the biggest issues with quantitative finance, and banking. I think the business side specifically is preventing a lot of the financial resources to enhance quants. I don't see a lot of it. Again, I see a lot of quants, they go through these masters or PhDs, they burn out, and then when they get into the positions, they work their way through it, they're excited, then they burn out. They don't want to mentor people, they don't want to do it. One of my big goals of this channel and what I want to do professionally and career-wise is I want to be that quant that's stepping out there and telling you guys the truth, which is part of this video. But I want to be the quant that's the mentor. I want to sit down with you. I want to explain to you why something's wrong. I want to explain to you how you fix that correctly so that you understand and learn the information. I don't want you to memorize it. I want you to learn it. And now going into the industry in itself and my disappointments with it in general, my expectations of what a quant is, what it should be, what banks should be allowing as the minimum standards are far, far, far higher than what is currently going on. I would like to see more just purist academics being pushed into these realms. Again, you have to coach them and explain to them how to work in an industry, right? It's not the same as academia. But one of the biggest criticism that I get from different people throughout the industry is that, Dimitri, you are too academic. You're too by the textbook. You know, at the end of the day, we care about making money. We care about the business. You're too academic, right? I keep getting that. But the thing is, for me, is like, that's my core. I'm not going to leave it. I'm not going to abandon my education. I'm not going to abandon, right, science, the scientific method, the thing that is the foundation for looking at problems and solving them correctly. Okay. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. Trust me. You don't just look at models and pick the best one that fits. But I'm also trying to adapt that soft side, the business side, looking at their issues, looking at their problems, but trying to put those together. And I'm at work in validation now. So when I see model developers that screw up, right, and I've had this happen with all kinds of people in different jobs across the country, even for some of the largest global firms. Some people, you sit down and you explain it to them and they're super excited to learn it. And like, they've got like a book out here, which I've got some notebooks here, but they're like, grab this pen and they're like, all right, ready? And like, you're explaining it and they're like just taking notes and taking notes and taking notes. And I'm stopping and trying to make sure they fully understand it. And then I run up and I'm like writing on a whiteboard or I have a piece of paper with them. And I'm trying to make sure that they really, really understand this, because if they can fix this next time, right, they're going to do a better job. So I'm not going to have any issues being a validator. Like, I'm right, makes my job easy. Why not fix it up front? But that being said, there's a lot of the industry, a lot of people that work in these jobs, the vast majority that just don't care. I would say the majority of people that claim to be quants, I started relabeling it. So fancy quant is my own branding, so I can define it however I want. Most people are not fancy quants. So fancy quants are people that eat, breathe, and sleep quantitative finance. They understand finance inside and out, right? On my free time, I'm reading textbooks here, right? I'm reading textbooks. I do book reviews for you guys, but I want to know the information. I want to improve myself. I want to know where I'm screwing up at. And yet I don't see this in the industry. The people I can't stand working with are the people that build terrible, crappy models You try to explain things to them, and then instead of learning from it, they fight you. They're going to fight you to the death because they just don't want to do it because they're lazy. They're lazy and they're uneducated. And at the end of the day, I can't fix that, right? I can't say, hey, like, change who you are as a person, right? You need to be the person that really understands this. You need to want to learn. They don't really care. And this is where my grind comes a lot with the business side, is that there's a lot of times a pursuit to make money for the sake of making money, and that's fine because that's what a business is there for. But at the same time, right, you have customers you need to take care of. You need to do right by them. From a quant finance perspective, again, doing things correctly will impact your shareholders by having better profits. It'll impact your shareholders by having, or your customers, for example, or your clients, by having better products and better results. So yes, a lot of the models that we build and we use, they actually impact the customers. We can see that it impacts the customers, okay? So throwing it out and saying business is about making money is complete crap. I'm really just tired of it in general from the industry. And again, there's a lot of other people out there pushing for it in different ways, writing books, criticizing openly. I've remained fairly quiet for the most part. But let's just talk about finally here. So is my degree overkill? No, I think a degree is like just scratching the surface. A PhD from the best mathematics university in the world is just scratching the surface. A physics degree, let's just address this real quick. A physics degree is completely worthless. So I'm just going to throw that out right there. Yes, you have a physics degree. Yes, you have the math. Yes, you have programming stats, but you have to be able to apply that to finance. So there's this big delusional theory that, you know physics, so therefore you're going to be a great quant. Let me tell you, I've worked with physicists over the years. They haven't been so great. They haven't done so well in the industry. Okay? So having a physics degree is beneficial and you can get a job doing it, but you have to highlight and show your expertise on this. And I think one of the reasons for this is Emmanuel Derman, so really great quant, I defined as a fancy quant, right? Really good guy. He has a physics background. If you read his book, My Life as a Quant, I'll put a link below. Again, he goes through this whole struggle and this process through life. He ends up being able to apply this to finance, but he grew and expanded, and he really understands that models are approximations, not reality. Okay, he emphasized this in multiple books. Because he succeeded, a lot of people think that, you need all these physicists and it's going to be this great, wonderful thing. And back in the day, physicists had the programming side, the math, and the stats, so they could somewhat mold them together and make them quants. Okay, having a physics degree for me, it doesn't matter at all. I don't really care. Great, so what? Prove yourself, right? You're not going to be a great all-star just because you have a physics degree. I'd much rather have a PhD in mathematics or econometrics or even just economics in general. But again, having enough stats and math, which is the key here, and being able to program these is crucial. So is the degree overkill? No, I think the degree is not even close to enough. I'm not happy with the academic community in general. I think the academic community, they had some strong programs. A bunch of other programs wanted to make money. They've all dived in and created just terrible crap slapped together programs with not enough rigor. Again, they're focusing on getting students jobs, not on doing academic rigor. And as you guys know, rigor. That is my entire focus and drive here because I see that it makes so much difference in the industry. And the reason being for this, I'll explain this to you. There's another guy that I've met in my career. One of the people you would look at his resume and expect he's not a quant at all. But he's similar to me, so that's probably another reason why I like him so much. But why I view him as a real quant is he can pick up material, he can read the technical aspects, he knows the answer, and he can validate or he can develop models, right? He can do it expertise-wise. I'll give you an example of this. The guy has never worked in any C languages, okay? He gets assigned a project that was written in C#. He picks up the project, he validates it, he finds mistakes and has them fix it. That's a quant. A quant is somebody that can just pick up the materials, read it, look at it, understand it, really know things, teach yourself quickly and efficiently, and then be able to give you the ins and outs and why it's dangerous to do it the way they're doing it, how do you make corrections, how do you fix it, okay? That for me is what a real quant is. A real quant is somebody that just has, so again, the real quant, which I hate when people say it, but I'm going to say it. The real quant is somebody that can do math, stats, computer science. You're going to have different areas you're stronger at than others, right? But I think the real defining point here is you have this continued learning, this desire to learn, this desire to solve problems, and you can do it at a very, very high level. You can read textbooks, very thick textbooks you can read through. You can take it, you can apply it, and you can do it better than everybody else, right? You should be that person. To get there, though, is a lifetime goal, okay? When I die, I'm never going to essentially be a quant. I don't think it's something that you actually reach and you get like a status of, right? The journey and the process and putting in the time and putting in the grind. And yes, I'm telling you this here as someone now who has a new baby, right? So somebody else put in the comments, they appreciate me for doing it, even with a new baby. Thank you. Life gets in the way, guys. It's really, really hard to continue that journey and that grind and put in the time and put in the effort. So I'm just going to wrap this video up here with a few points. You really need a master's at minimum. PhD is preferred. Again, a master's is fine in many cases. It's just an indication of intelligence. So if you're really, really smart and you go out and you get the degree and the training, awesome. You do need the basic knowledge of stats, math, and computer science to be a quant in general, okay? Different areas are going to focus on different things, but that should just be your starting point. And a note here too, when you interview people and they think they're really smart, so people that graduate with a master's or PhD, if you think you're really smart, you're probably pretty stupid, okay? I'm just gonna throw it out there. When I graduated, I felt like I knew nothing, right? I learned so much new stuff that like my circle of knowledge went from like a tiny circle to a little bit bigger circle, but the circumference on the outside just gets a little bit bigger. The bigger your circumference gets, the more information you know. You realize now there's so much more on the outside that you just don't know. Like I just don't have enough time to read enough textbooks and dive in and like learn everything I want to learn. And the more I do it, the bigger my circle gets, then I get like a bigger desire and I have to like run and find more textbooks and read more and more and more and academic papers, and it's endless, okay? So being a quant, getting the degree, it's not enough. Now, do you have to have a PhD to be a real quant? No, you do not. You just need to be a really smart person in general. You need to be driven, and there's a lot of characteristic attributes that I don't think you can teach a lot of times. Again, there's probably ways you probably could, I don't know, but it's not something you can do. Saying that you need a PhD and you have to have a PhD is complete crap. I've run circles around every PhD I've ever met. So I have not met a PhD that's like super brilliant and bright and can go out there and do all this great stuff. Yes, I've worked with PhDs at some of the top named and ranked universities in the US and in the world. Yes, I run circles around them every single day when I do model development, model validation. But again, finding real quants is rare. Like I mentioned, that other guy, again, he doesn't have the most perfect background, but he can do the work. He can pick things up quickly. That to me is what really makes a quant, is being able to pick things up, do it correctly without screwing up and out losing money. So that's a little bit of my rant here on answering these. No, you don't need a PhD. That does not make you a quant. I think it's ridiculous in itself. Again, it does indicate that you have deeper interests. You want to spend more time on a topic. You want to dig more rigorously. But as an example, I've interviewed PhDs and they've known jack. Almost nothing. I've interviewed math PhDs. I knew more math than they did. I don't have a math undergrad. I don't have a math master's. I have an applied economics master's from one of the top rated universities in the world. But again, right, math was not my focus. If I can do the math better than you, if I can understand the material better than you, and you're supposed to be a leading expert in this, it's pretty sad. So anyways, those are my takes here. Those are my rants. Again, too, on the degree part, you're never going to use all of your degree, but you should at least find what you like and dig as deep as you can. So anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, until next time.